Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Mano and today I'm absolutely thrilled to bring you something special that's genuinely going to change how you think about communication. We're diving deep into one of the most powerful books I've ever studied, Speak Smart, The Psychology of Powerful Communication. And trust me, this isn't just another communication book filled with generic advice that you'll forget next week. I've spent weeks really immersing myself in this material, studying the psychological principles, the neuroscience, the practical strategies, and honestly, it's blown my mind how interconnected everything is. The insights in this book aren't just theoretical, they're backed by real world application and based on how our brains actually work. Before we get started, if you find this content valuable, please smash that like button because it helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we are constantly breaking down high impact books and knowledge that will transform how you communicate, influence others, and achieve your goals. And here's something important. Check out our book summary playlist where we've got complete breakdowns of some incredible books that will take your personal and professional development to the next level. Seriously, bookmark that playlist because you'll want to come back to it. Now here's the thing that really grabbed me about this book. Most people think communication is just about the words you say, right? Wrong, dead wrong. And that's exactly where we're starting. Let's jump in. Chapter 1. The Fatal Communication Mistakes That Kill Your Influence Before You Even Speak. Okay. So the first chapter of this book absolutely crushed my perspective on communication because it reveals something that most people never think about. Before you even open your mouth, before you say a single word, you've either already positioned yourself as someone people will listen to or someone they'll dismiss. And that's a hard truth to swallow when you realize how much damage we do to ourselves without even knowing it. Here's the brutal statistic that opened my eyes. 95% of people make fundamental communication mistakes that signal weakness and insecurity before they even start talking. 95%. And the worst part is, most of these people have no idea they're doing it. They go through life wondering why they're not getting the respect they deserve, why they're not being promoted, why their ideas get overlooked. And the answer is hidden in these 7 fatal mistakes that we are about to break down. The first fatal mistake is what the book calls reactive communication. And honestly, this one hits home for so many people. Reactive communicators are people who wait for others to set the tone. They wait for others to start conversations. They respond to what others say rather than leading the discussion. Think about it. If you're constantly waiting for someone else to decide what you talk about, you're essentially giving away your power. You're telling everyone around you that you're a follower, not a leader. Reactive communicators use phrases like, I think maybe, you're probably right, I'm not sure but, and they apologize for having opinions. They ask permission to speak. They seek constant validation from others. And here's what's fascinating about the psychology here. Our brains are wired to respect certainty and authority. When you show uncertainty and constant hesitation, your brain is literally broadcasting to everyone else that you don't believe in yourself. And if you don't believe in yourself, why should they believe in you? The second fatal mistake is information dumping. And this one is so common in our modern world. People think that if they just provide enough facts, enough data, enough evidence, they'll convince people. They overwhelm others with statistics, details, explanations, thinking that volume equals persuasion. But here's the psychological reality. Our brains don't process information logically first. We process it emotionally first, and then we find logical reasons to support those emotions. When you dump information on someone, you are actually creating cognitive overload. Their brain shuts down. They become mentally exhausted. Instead of being persuaded, they become resistant. They stop listening not because your information is wrong, but because their brain can't process it effectively. I have seen this happen in meetings, in presentations, in casual conversations. Someone gets excited about an idea and they just vomit all the details at you, and you end up feeling confused and overwhelmed instead of interested and convinced. The third fatal mistake is emotional leakage. And this is something that the book emphasizes repeatedly throughout all the chapters because it's foundational to everything. Emotional leakage is when your internal emotional state unconsciously shows up in your communication through your voice, your tone, your body language, your word choice. If you're nervous, anxious, insecure, or desperate, that emotion leaks out. And here's the thing, people sense it immediately. It's not a conscious thing, they just feel it. Your voice might get slightly higher when you're nervous. You speak faster when you're anxious. You use more filler words when you're uncertain. You lean forward when you're desperate for approval. These micro signals communicate so much more than your actual words. You could be saying all the right things, but if your body language and tone are broadcasting anxiety, people won't trust you. Because if you can't even control your own emotions, how can you be trusted with anything important? The fourth fatal mistake is mirror communication. And I really didn't think about this before reading the book. Mirror communicators unconsciously copy the communication style, energy level, and opinions of whoever they're talking to. They think this makes them likable, but it actually makes them forgettable and untrustworthy. When you're constantly changing who you are to match whoever you're with, you lose your unique voice. People can sense that you're not being authentic, and that kills any chance of real influence. This is particularly damaging because not only do you lose your authenticity, but you also lose the ability to add real value to conversations. You're just echoing what others have already said. Instead of being seen as agreeable, you're seen as weak, indecisive, someone without their own convictions. And in the world of influence, conviction is everything. People follow people who know what they believe and aren't afraid to say it. The fifth fatal mistake is defensive communication. And this is where a lot of conflict gets created unnecessarily. Defensive communicators interpret neutral questions or comments as personal attacks. Someone asks, "Why did you do it that way?" And instead of calmly explaining your reasoning, you get defensive. You start explaining yourself, justifying your actions, protecting your ego. You turn a normal conversation into a battle where you have to prove you're right. Defensive communication creates this negative spiral. When you get defensive, the other person becomes more aggressive, which makes you even more defensive. It's like a feedback loop that destroys relationships and erodes trust. And here's the psychological message it sends. You look insecure about your competence. You look like someone who can't handle honest questions or feedback. That absolutely undermines your influence and your authority. The sixth fatal mistake is approval-seeking communication. And I think this is probably the most insidious of all because it hides behind being nice. Approval seekers have one primary goal in every conversation: be liked. That's it. They'll sacrifice their opinions, they'll avoid disagreement, they'll tell people what they think they want to hear rather than what they actually need to hear. They prioritize harmony over truth. This seems nice on the surface, right? But here's what actually happens. People lose respect for you. They know you'll tell them whatever they want to hear, so they can't trust your actual opinions. They also sense that you care more about being liked than being honest, and that makes you irrelevant in important decisions and conversations. Because when it really matters, people don't want someone who's trying to be liked. They want someone who's willing to tell them the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. The seventh fatal mistake is unconscious communication. And this is where most people live. They've never studied how communication actually works. They wing it and hope for the best. They don't understand how their tone affects perception. They don't know how their word choice creates meaning. They don't realize how their body language influences outcomes. It's like trying to perform surgery without understanding anatomy. You might get lucky, but you're probably going to cause damage. Unconscious communicators repeat the same mistakes over and over because they don't know what they're doing wrong. They blame other people for misunderstanding them instead of taking responsibility for unclear communication. They get frustrated when people don't respond the way they want, but they never examine their own role in creating those outcomes. And that's the tragedy here. The solution is right there waiting for them, but they are not even aware the problem exists. Now, here's what blew my mind about this chapter. Once you become aware of these patterns, you can start changing them immediately. Every single conversation becomes an opportunity to practice conscious, strategic communication. You start moving from unconscious patterns that destroy your influence to deliberate choices that build it. And that's the foundation of everything else in this book. Chapter 2: The Neuroscience of First Impressions. Why People Decide About You in 3 Seconds. Alright, so this chapter absolutely fascinated me because it explains something that we've all experienced but never really understood. Your brain makes snap judgments about other people in less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds. And these judgments are incredibly difficult to change once they're made. This isn't a flaw in human psychology. It's a survival mechanism that evolved over millions of years to help us quickly identify threats, allies, and opportunities. What's crazy is that within those 3 seconds, people have already decided whether you're competent, confident, trustworthy, and high status or low status. And those initial judgments shape every single interaction you have with them afterward. The book calls this thin slice judgments, and it's based on how your brain takes a tiny slice of information and uses it to make broad predictions about your character, abilities, and intentions. These predictions are actually remarkably accurate for basic personality traits. But here's the important part: they are heavily influenced by unconscious biases and social conditioning. The good news is that means you can trigger positive first impressions by understanding what signals the brain is looking for. You're not trying to be fake, you're understanding the actual signals that communicate competence, confidence, and trustworthiness. The first element of powerful first impressions is physical presence. Before you say a single word, people are evaluating your posture, your movement, and your spatial awareness. Confident people take up appropriate space. They move with purpose. They maintain steady, controlled movements. They don't fidget, they don't rush, they don't make themselves smaller. Their physical presence communicates that they belong in that space and have every right to be there. Physical presence starts with posture, and this is something you can work on immediately. Stand or sit with your spine straight, shoulders back, and head level. This isn't about being rigid or military-like. It's about being aligned and grounded. When your posture is strong and stable, it triggers unconscious associations with competence, leadership, and emotional control. When your posture is weak, collapsed, or fidgety, it signals insecurity, nervousness, and low confidence. Your body is literally telling people what you think of yourself. Your movement patterns also communicate volumes about your internal state. Confident people move deliberately and smoothly. They don't rush unless there's real urgency, and they don't move slowly unless they're being intentional about creating a specific effect. Their movements have purpose, direction, and control. All of that signals that they have control over themselves and their environment. The second element is facial expression and eye contact, and this is huge for establishing authority and connection. Your face is the most expressive part of your body, and people read it constantly for emotional information. Confident communicators maintain relaxed, alert facial expressions that show they are engaged but not overly eager. They make appropriate eye contact that shows interest and attention without being aggressive or invasive. Eye contact is particularly important for establishing authority. The book shares that the optimal pattern is to maintain eye contact for 3 to 5 second intervals while you're speaking and 4 to 6 second intervals while you're listening. This creates a sense of connection without triggering discomfort or dominance battles. Too little eye contact suggests you're avoiding something or lack confidence. Too much starts to feel aggressive and intimidating. There's a sweet spot, and that sweet spot communicates that you're confident, honest, and engaged. Your facial expressions should match your internal emotional state and your intended message. If you're nervous but trying to appear confident, the mismatch will be obvious and undermine your credibility. This is why emotional regulation is so crucial for powerful communication. You can't just fake confidence. You actually need to feel calm and confident for it to come through authentically in your face. The third element is vocal quality and tone. And honestly, this might be one of the most underrated aspects of communication. Your voice carries enormous amounts of information about your emotional state, confidence level, and social status. Within seconds of hearing you speak, people make judgments about your competence, authority, and trustworthiness based purely on how you sound. Confident voices have specific characteristics. They are well supported by breath, which creates a full, rich tone. They have controlled pace, which shows thoughtfulness and intentionality. They have appropriate volume, which demonstrates awareness of the space and audience. They have clear articulation, which signals education and attention to detail. And they have varied intonation, which keeps people engaged and interested. Many people unconsciously sabotage their vocal authority by speaking too quietly, which signals insecurity. Speaking too quickly signals nervousness. Using uptalk where your statements sound like questions also makes you seem uncertain. These vocal patterns immediately lower your perceived status and competence regardless of what you're actually saying. And once people make that judgment in the first 3 seconds, it's really difficult to change it. The fourth element is your opening words and energy. The first thing you say sets the tone for the entire conversation, and people remember it disproportionately due to something called the primacy effect. Confident communicators open with clear, purposeful statements that establish their authority and set the direction for the discussion. Weak openings include apologizing for speaking, apologizing for interrupting, apologizing for taking up time. Uncertain phrases like, "I'm not sure if this is right, but," or "I hope you don't mind me saying," immediately signal that you don't value your own time or opinions. That trains others to devalue them as well. Strong openings are direct and purposeful. They might include a clear statement of your purpose, an interesting observation that demonstrates insight, or a strategic question that engages the other person's thinking. The key is to lead the conversation from the first moment rather than waiting for others to set the direction. The fifth element is emotional congruence, which means your words, emotions, and body language all align and support the same message. When there's incongruence between these channels, people unconsciously sense that something is off, and they become less trusting and less engaged. You can't fake this effectively because micro-expressions, body language, and vocal qualities leak your true emotional state. This is why developing real confidence and emotional control is so much more effective than trying to use superficial techniques to appear confident. The psychological principle here is that people pick up on incongruence at a subconscious level. You might be saying the right words, but if your body language, facial expressions, and tone don't align with those words, people won't believe you. And if they don't believe you, your influence is zero. The neuroscience of first impressions reveals that people are constantly evaluating you on multiple levels simultaneously. They are assessing your competence, your confidence, your trustworthiness, your status, and your intentions, all within the first few seconds of meeting you. By understanding how these assessments work, you can consciously influence them and create powerful positive first impressions that open doors and create opportunities. Chapter 3: The Authority Matrix: How to Command Respect Without Being Aggressive. Okay, this chapter really shifted my thinking about what authority actually means. Most people think authority comes from being loud, aggressive, or dominating. You know the type. People who have to prove they're in charge by forcing their will on others. But real authority is the complete opposite of that. True authority is calm, controlled, and magnetic. It draws people in rather than pushing them away, and it creates respect rather than fear or resentment. The difference between authority and aggression is fundamental, and it's crucial because one builds your influence while the other destroys it. Authority is based on competence, confidence, and emotional control. When you have genuine authority, people naturally defer to your judgment. They seek your opinions, they follow your lead. This happens because authority triggers unconscious respect and trust. People feel safe around authoritative individuals because they sense that these people have control over themselves and their environment. Aggression, on the other hand, is based on force, intimidation, and emotional reactivity. Aggressive people might get temporary compliance, but they don't get genuine respect or willing cooperation. Aggression actually signals weakness because it shows that you need to use force to get what you want rather than earning it through competence and character. That's the psychological insight here. Real power doesn't need to be forced, it's naturally respected. The first element of natural authority is emotional regulation. Authoritative people remain calm and controlled even in stressful situations. They don't get defensive, angry, or flustered when challenged. This emotional stability signals strength, competence, and leadership capability. When others see that you can maintain your composure under pressure, they naturally view you as someone who can handle responsibility and make good decisions. Emotional regulation doesn't mean being emotionless or robotic. It means being able to choose your emotional responses rather than being controlled by them. Authoritative people feel emotions, but they process them internally before responding. This allows them to respond strategically rather than reactively, which leads to better outcomes and increased respect. And here's what's powerful about this. People notice when you stay calm under pressure. They remember it. It becomes part of how they see you. The second element is intellectual confidence. This means having well thought out opinions based on solid reasoning and being able to articulate them clearly and persuasively. You're not afraid of intellectual challenges because you've done the work to develop informed perspectives. Intellectual confidence shows up in how you present ideas, how you defend positions, and how you engage with opposing viewpoints. Intellectual confidence is different from arrogance, and this distinction is important. Arrogant people think they know everything and dismiss other viewpoints without consideration. Intellectually confident people know what they know and acknowledge what they don't know. They are open to learning and changing their minds when presented with better information, but they don't waver on principles they've carefully considered. And people respect that. They respect someone who can hold their ground without being closed-minded. The third element is purposeful communication. Authoritative people communicate with clear intention behind every word. They don't speak just to fill silence or to be polite. When they contribute to conversations, they add genuine value through insights, questions, or information that moves the discussion forward. This purposefulness makes others pay attention because they know that when you speak, it's worth listening to. Purposeful communication also means being selective about when you speak. Authoritative people don't feel compelled to comment on everything or to prove their intelligence in every conversation. They speak when they have something meaningful to contribute and remain silent when they don't. This selectivity makes their words carry more weight when they do choose to speak. People start anticipating what you'll say because you don't waste their time with unnecessary chatter. The fourth element is boundary setting. Authority requires clear boundaries about what you will and won't accept in terms of behavior, treatment, and communication. These boundaries aren't aggressive or punitive. They are simply clear statements about your standards and expectations. When people know where your boundaries are, they are more likely to respect them and respect you. Setting boundaries effectively requires calm consistency. You don't need to get angry or aggressive to enforce boundaries. You just need to be clear about consequences and follow through consistently. When someone crosses a boundary, you address it directly and matter-of-factly, without drama or emotional escalation. This shows that you take yourself seriously and expect others to do the same, and that's hugely respected. The fifth element is competence demonstration. Real authority is ultimately based on proven ability to get results. People respect you when they see evidence that you know what you're doing and can deliver on your promises. This competence can be demonstrated through past achievements, current performance, or clear expertise in relevant areas. Competence demonstration isn't about bragging or showing off. It's about quietly and consistently proving your value through your actions and results. When people see that you consistently deliver high quality work, meet deadlines, solve problems, and add value, they naturally begin to defer to your judgment and seek your input. You don't have to tell them you're competent. Your results speak for themselves. The sixth element is strategic vulnerability. This might seem counterintuitive, but showing appropriate vulnerability actually strengthens authority rather than weakening it. Strategic vulnerability means being honest about limitations, acknowledging mistakes, and asking for help when needed. This shows confidence and emotional maturity rather than weakness. The key is that the vulnerability must be strategic and appropriate. Sharing every insecurity, doubt, and personal problem undermines authority. But acknowledging specific limitations or mistakes while taking responsibility for them actually increases trust and respect. It shows that you're honest, self-aware, and focused on results rather than protecting your ego. And people trust someone like that far more than someone who tries to appear perfect. The seventh element is social calibration. Authoritative people understand social dynamics and adjust their communication style to fit the situation without compromising their core principles. They know when to be more formal or casual, when to be direct or diplomatic, when to lead or support. This social intelligence allows them to maintain authority across different contexts and relationships. Social calibration requires observing and understanding the unwritten rules of different social environments. What works in a boardroom might not work at a family dinner. What's appropriate with peers might not be appropriate with subordinates or superiors. Authoritative people navigate these differences skillfully while maintaining their authentic personality and values. Authority is not about dominating others or getting your way through force. It's about earning respect through competence, character, and emotional maturity. When you develop genuine authority, people naturally want to follow your lead, seek your advice, and respect your decisions. This creates influence that lasts and relationships that strengthen over time rather than deteriorating due to resentment or fear. Chapter 4: The Persuasion Operating System: How to Change Minds Without Manipulation. Alright, this chapter is critical because it makes a distinction that most people never think about. Persuasion is not manipulation. Manipulation involves deceiving or coercing people to act against their best interests for your benefit. Persuasion involves helping people make decisions that are genuinely good for them while also achieving your legitimate objectives. These are completely different things with completely different outcomes. The foundation of ethical persuasion is understanding how people actually make decisions. Most people think decision making is a logical, rational process. But neuroscience reveals that it's primarily emotional. People make decisions based on feelings, and then they use logic to justify those decisions to themselves and others. This is a crucial psychological insight because it means that effective persuasion must engage emotions first, then provide logical support for the emotional decision. This doesn't mean manipulating emotions or creating false feelings. It means understanding what people genuinely care about and helping them see how your proposal connects to their real values, priorities, and desires. When persuasion aligns with someone's authentic interests and emotions, it feels natural and beneficial rather than pushy or manipulative. The first principle of the persuasion operating system is identifying the other person's core motivations. Everyone has primary drivers that guide their decisions. These might include security, achievement, recognition, autonomy, connection, growth, or contribution. Before attempting to persuade someone, you need to understand what really motivates them, not what you think should motivate them. You can identify motivations through careful observation and strategic questions. What topics make them light up with enthusiasm? What concerns keep them awake at night? What achievements are they most proud of? What fears do they try to avoid? What values do they consistently defend? Understanding these deeper motivations allows you to frame your proposals in ways that genuinely resonate with their priorities. The second principle is establishing genuine rapport and trust. People are only persuaded by people they like, trust, and respect. This rapport can't be faked through superficial techniques like mirroring body language or using someone's name repeatedly. Real rapport comes from authentic interest in the other person, demonstrated competence, and consistent reliability. Building rapport requires shifting your focus from what you want to get to what you can give. When you genuinely care about helping someone solve their problems or achieve their goals, they sense this authenticity and become more open to your influence. This doesn't mean being selfless. It means finding genuine alignment between your interests and theirs. It's win-win thinking, not zero-sum thinking. The third principle is strategic storytelling. Facts tell, but stories sell. This is because stories engage emotions, create vivid mental pictures, and make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. Instead of presenting dry information or logical arguments, you embed your key points in compelling narratives that help people visualize and feel the benefits of your proposal. Effective persuasion stories have specific elements. They feature relatable characters facing similar challenges to your audience. They include specific sensory details that make the story vivid and memorable. They show clear cause and effect relationships between actions and outcomes. They end with results that your audience wants to achieve. And they position your proposal as the key factor that enabled the positive outcome. The fourth principle is addressing resistance proactively. Every person has reasons for potentially saying no to your proposal, and ignoring these concerns doesn't make them go away. Skilled persuaders identify likely objections and address them before they are raised. This shows that you understand the other person's perspective and have thoughtfully considered their concerns. Addressing resistance isn't about overpowering objections with the stronger arguments. It's about acknowledging legitimate concerns and providing genuine solutions or alternatives. Sometimes this means modifying your proposal to better meet their needs. Sometimes it means providing additional information or assurances. Sometimes it means accepting that your proposal isn't right for them at this time. The fifth principle is creating urgency without pressure. People postpone decisions when there's no compelling reason to act now. Effective persuasion includes legitimate reasons why acting sooner is better than acting later. This might include limited availability, time-sensitive opportunities, or increasing costs or difficulties over time. The key is that the urgency must be real, not artificial. Fake deadlines backfire when discovered. The sixth principle is making it easy to say yes. Even when people want to accept your proposal, they might hesitate if the process seems complicated, risky, or overwhelming. Effective persuasion removes as many barriers as possible and makes the next step clear, simple, and low risk. This might involve breaking a large commitment into smaller steps, providing guarantees or trial periods, reducing upfront costs, or handling administrative details yourself. The easier you make it for people to move forward, the more likely they are to do so, even when they are genuinely interested in your proposal. The seventh principle is confirming commitment and next steps. Many persuasion attempts fail not because people aren't convinced, but because the conversation ends without clear agreement about what happens next. Once someone agrees to your proposal, you need to confirm their commitment and establish specific next steps with timelines and responsibilities. The persuasion operating system works because it aligns with how people naturally think, feel, and make decisions. It doesn't try to override their judgment or manipulate their emotions. Instead, it helps them make good decisions by providing relevant information, addressing legitimate concerns, and making it easy to take action that serves their interests while also achieving your objectives. Chapter 5: Strategic Silence: The Power of What You Don't Say. This chapter genuinely surprised me because silence is something most people are terrified of, and they don't realize that silence is actually a powerful communication tool. Most people are afraid of silence in conversations. They feel compelled to fill every pause with words, even when they have nothing meaningful to say. This fear of silence destroys their communication power because it makes them appear nervous, anxious, and lacking in confidence. But here's the thing the book teaches. Silence is not the absence of communication, it's a different form of communication. Strategic silence can convey confidence, authority, thoughtfulness, and control. It can create space for others to reveal important information. It can add weight and impact to your words. It can diffuse tension and create connection. And it can give you time to think before responding instead of reacting impulsively. The first type of strategic silence is the confidence pause. This is a brief silence before you speak that shows you're choosing your words carefully rather than blurting out the first thing that comes to mind. Confident people are comfortable with this pause because they are not desperate to prove themselves or fill every moment with chatter. The confidence pause works because it signals thoughtfulness and intentionality. When you pause before speaking, people unconsciously assume that what you're about to say is worth waiting for. This makes them pay closer attention to your words and gives your message more impact. It also gives you time to organize your thoughts and choose the most effective way to communicate your point. The second type is the emphasis pause. This is a strategic silence after making an important point that allows it to sink in before moving on. Most people rush from point to point without giving their audience time to process important information. The emphasis pause ensures that your key messages are absorbed and remembered rather than lost in a stream of continuous talking. Emphasis pauses are particularly powerful after making bold statements, asking important questions, or delivering surprising information. The silence creates mental space for the other person to consider what you've said rather than immediately thinking about their response. This increases the likelihood that your message will influence their thinking and decision making. The third type is the invitation silence. This is a longer pause that creates space for the other person to contribute to the conversation. Many people monopolize conversations by talking continuously, which prevents them from learning important information about the other person's thoughts, feelings, and motivations. Invitation silences encourage others to share more than they initially intended. They work because most people feel compelled to fill conversational gaps. When you create space through silence, others will often reveal information they wouldn't share if you kept talking. This information can be invaluable for understanding their perspectives, building rapport, and identifying opportunities for connection or persuasion. The fourth type is the processing pause. This is a silence that gives you time to think before responding to difficult questions or challenging statements. Instead of feeling pressured to respond immediately, you can take a moment to consider your options and choose the most strategic response. This prevents you from saying something you'll regret and helps you maintain control of the conversation. Processing pauses are especially important when dealing with confrontation, criticism, or high-pressure situations. The natural tendency is to defend yourself immediately, but this often leads to reactive responses that escalate conflict or undermine your position. A strategic pause allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than emotionally, which leads to better outcomes. The fifth type is the tension pause. This is a silence that allows uncomfortable emotions or difficult topics to exist without immediately trying to fix them or move past them. Many people are so uncomfortable with tension that they rush to resolve it even when sitting with the discomfort would be more productive. Tension pauses can be powerful in negotiations, difficult conversations, or when addressing performance issues. Instead of immediately offering solutions or reassurances, you allow the other person to feel the full weight of the situation. This often motivates them to take responsibility or propose solutions themselves, rather than waiting for you to fix their problems. The sixth type is the reflection silence. This is a pause that gives both parties time to consider what has been discussed before moving to the next topic or making decisions. Reflection silences prevent rushed decisions and ensure that important conversations receive adequate consideration. Using silence effectively requires overcoming your discomfort with conversational gaps. Most people find silence awkward because they interpret it as a sign that the conversation isn't going well. But strategic silence actually improves conversation quality by creating space for deeper thinking, more genuine sharing, and more thoughtful responses. The key to comfortable silence is shifting your mindset from feeling responsible for constant entertainment to being confident in your presence. You don't need to fill every moment with words to add value to a conversation. Sometimes, the most valuable thing you can contribute is attentive listening and thoughtful pauses that encourage others to share more deeply. The power of silence lies in its rarity. In a world where most people talk too much and listen too little, those who master strategic silence stand out as unusually thoughtful, confident, and compelling communicators. They are remembered not just for what they say, but for how they make others feel heard, understood, and respected through their attentive listening and strategic pauses. Chapter 6: The Social Calibration Code: Reading Rooms and Adapting Your Communication Style. This chapter is absolutely fascinating because it covers something that separates good communicators from great communicators: the ability to read social situations and adapt accordingly. The most sophisticated communicators possess an almost supernatural ability to read social situations and adapt their communication style accordingly. They seem to know exactly what to say, how to say it, and when to remain silent in any environment. This isn't magic or natural talent. It's a learnable skill called social calibration. Social calibration is the ability to accurately assess the unwritten rules of any social environment and adjust your communication to work within those rules while still achieving your objectives. Every social situation has invisible dynamics, power structures, cultural norms, and emotional undercurrents that determine what kind of communication will be effective and what will backfire. Most people fail at social calibration because they use the same communication approach in every situation. They speak to their boss the same way they speak to their friends. They use the same tone in formal meetings that they use in casual conversations. They apply the same strategies in high tension situations that they use in relaxed environments. This lack of adaptation severely limits their influence and often creates unnecessary conflict or resistance. The first element of social calibration is situational awareness. Before you open your mouth, you need to assess the environment you are entering. What is the formal hierarchy and who holds decision making power? What is the emotional climate? Are people stressed, relaxed, anxious, or excited? What are the cultural norms? What behaviors are expected versus prohibited? What is the time pressure and how much depth versus efficiency is required? Situational awareness requires observing multiple channels simultaneously. You're reading body language, listening to tone patterns, noting who speaks and who remains silent, watching how people position themselves physically, and identifying who others defer to or seek approval from. This information tells you how to position yourself and what communication style will be most effective. The second element is audience analysis. Different people respond to different types of communication, and effective calibration requires understanding your specific audience. Are they analytical people who want facts and logic, or relational people who want connection and emotion? Are they detail-oriented people who need comprehensive information, or big picture people who want summary and vision? Are they risk-averse people who need reassurance, or risk-tolerant people who respond to bold proposals? You can assess audience preferences through several indicators. Their professional background often predicts their communication preferences. Engineers and analysts typically prefer logical, structured presentations, while sales and marketing people often respond better to emotional storytelling. Their questions reveal whether they think in details or concepts, whether they focus on problems or opportunities, whether they prioritize safety or growth. The third element is power dynamics assessment. Every social situation has formal and informal power structures that determine how influence flows. Formal power comes from titles, positions, and official authority. Informal power comes from relationships, expertise, social status, and personal charisma. Effective communication requires understanding both types of power and adapting your approach accordingly. When communicating with people who have higher formal power, you typically need to be more structured, respectful, and results focused. You should prepare thoroughly, present information clearly, and respect their time constraints. When communicating with people who have informal power, you might need to be more relational, collaborative, and patient in building consensus. The fourth element is cultural competence. Every organization, industry, and social group has unique cultural norms that affect communication effectiveness. These cultures determine what topics are safe versus dangerous, what communication styles are respected versus rejected, and what behaviors signal competence versus incompetence. Corporate cultures vary dramatically in their communication preferences. Some value direct confrontational debate, while others prioritize harmony and consensus. Some reward bold risk taking, while others punish any deviation from established procedures. Some encourage informal casual interaction, while others maintain strict professional boundaries. Misreading these cultural signals can destroy your credibility and influence. The fifth element is emotional intelligence calibration. Every social situation has an emotional tone that affects how people receive and process communication. High stress environments require different approaches than relaxed environments. Celebratory situations call for different energy than problem solving situations. Crisis moments demand different strategies than routine interactions. Emotional calibration means matching your energy and tone to the situational requirements while still maintaining your authentic personality. If everyone is stressed and urgent, you can't be slow and casual without appearing disconnected. If everyone is formal and serious, you can't be playful and irreverent without seeming inappropriate. The sixth element is strategic flexibility. Social calibration isn't about becoming a chameleon who has no consistent identity. It's about being strategically flexible in your communication approach while maintaining your core values and objectives. You're adapting your methods, not your principles, your style, not your substance, your presentation, not your purpose. The seventh element is real-time adjustment. Social calibration isn't just about reading a situation correctly at the beginning. It's about continuously monitoring feedback and adjusting your approach as the situation evolves. People's moods change, power dynamics shift, and new information emerges that requires communication strategy modifications. Mastering social calibration transforms you from someone who is effective in limited context to someone who can succeed in any environment. You become the person others rely on for important conversations, difficult negotiations, and high stakes presentations because you have the rare ability to read situations accurately and communicate in ways that achieve results while maintaining relationships. Chapter 7: The Confidence Algorithm. Unshakable self-assurance in any situation. Alright, this chapter completely changed how I think about confidence. I always thought confidence was something you either had or didn't have, like a personality trait you were born with. But the book makes it crystal clear. Confidence is not a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill you can systematically develop. Here's what blew my mind about this chapter. Most people think confidence comes from success, but the reality is reversed. Confidence creates success, not the other way around. When you understand how confidence actually works, you can build it deliberately and maintain it consistently, regardless of external circumstances. This is game-changing because it means you're not at the mercy of whether things go well or not. The foundation of unshakable confidence is understanding the difference between outcome-based confidence and process-based confidence. Outcome-based confidence depends on external results and other people's approval. When things go well, you feel confident. When they don't, you feel insecure. This type of confidence is fragile and unreliable because you can't control outcomes or other people's reactions. Process based confidence comes from trusting your ability to handle whatever happens. It's based on your preparation, competence, and emotional resilience rather than specific results. When you have process based confidence, you remain steady and self assured even when outcomes are uncertain or disappointing, because you know you have the skills and character to navigate any situation effectively. The first element of the confidence algorithm is competence building. Real confidence is rooted in real ability, and you can't fake competence for very long without being exposed. This means that building confidence requires continuously developing your knowledge, skills, and expertise in areas that matter to your goals and responsibilities. Competence building isn't just about technical skills, it also includes communication skills, emotional regulation, leadership abilities, problem solving capabilities, and social intelligence. The broader your competence base, the more confident you can be in diverse situations because you know you have the tools to add value and achieve results. The key to competence building is deliberate practice, focused on your specific weaknesses and challenges. Most people practice what they are already good at because it feels comfortable and rewarding. But confidence comes from knowing you can handle difficult situations, which requires practicing the skills you'll need when things go wrong. The second element is preparation mastery. Confidence grows when you know you've prepared thoroughly for whatever challenges you might face. This preparation includes researching relevant information, anticipating potential problems, developing contingency plans, and rehearsing important communications or presentations. Preparation mastery goes beyond surface level planning to include mental and emotional preparation. You visualize successful outcomes, but you also prepare mentally for potential setbacks or difficulties. You practice staying calm and focused under pressure. You develop quick decision making processes for unexpected situations. This comprehensive preparation gives you confidence that you can handle anything that comes up. The third element is evidence accumulation. Your brain builds confidence by accumulating evidence that you can succeed in challenging situations. Every time you handle a difficult conversation, navigate a complex problem, or achieve a meaningful goal, you add to your evidence bank of personal competence. Most people don't pay attention to their successes and accomplishments, so they don't get the confidence benefits from their achievements. They focus on failures and problems while dismissing or minimizing their successes. Building confidence requires deliberately noting and remembering evidence of your capabilities and achievements. The fourth element is self-talk optimization. Your internal dialogue has enormous impact on your confidence levels because your brain believes what you tell it repeatedly. Most people have negative self-talk patterns that undermine their confidence through constant self-criticism, doubt, and catastrophic thinking. Optimizing self-talk doesn't mean unrealistic positive thinking or denying genuine challenges. It means developing accurate, realistic self-assessment that acknowledges both your strengths and areas for improvement without being unnecessarily harsh or defeatist. You speak to yourself the way you would speak to a valued colleague, objective, supportive, and constructive. Effective self-talk focuses on process rather than outcome, on effort rather than ability, and on learning rather than proving. Instead of telling yourself you have to be perfect, you remind yourself that you're capable of handling challenges and learning from mistakes. Instead of fearing failure, you frame difficulties as opportunities to demonstrate resilience and problem-solving skills. The fifth element is posture and physiology management. Your physical state directly affects your emotional and mental state through the mind-body connection. When you maintain confident posture, move with purpose, and control your breathing, you actually feel more confident, not just appear more confident. Confident physiology includes standing or sitting with proper alignment, moving deliberately rather than frantically, making appropriate eye contact, and using controlled gestures that support your communication. These physical practices don't just project confidence to others, they generate genuine feelings of confidence within yourself. Breathing patterns are particularly important for confidence management. Shallow, rapid breathing triggers anxiety and nervousness, while deep, controlled breathing promotes calm confidence. Learning to regulate your breathing gives you a powerful tool for managing your emotional state in any situation. The sixth element is comfort zone expansion. Confidence grows through experience with challenging situations, and you can't build that experience by staying in your comfort zone. This requires deliberately seeking out situations that stretch your abilities and force you to develop new skills and capabilities. Comfort zone expansion should be systematic and progressive rather than reckless and overwhelming. You want to challenge yourself enough to grow, but not so much that you become overwhelmed and lose confidence. The goal is to gradually expand your comfort zone so that situations that once seemed impossible become routine. The seventh element is identity alignment. The most powerful confidence comes from alignment between your actions and your authentic identity. When you're trying to be someone you're not or acting in ways that contradict your values, you feel insecure and uncertain regardless of your external success. Identity aligned confidence means knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you are capable of achieving. It means being comfortable with your strengths and limitations without feeling the need to pretend or compensate. It means acting in ways that reflect your genuine personality and values rather than trying to meet other people's expectations. The confidence algorithm works because it builds genuine self-assurance based on real competence, preparation, evidence, and self-knowledge rather than superficial techniques or positive thinking. When you systematically develop these elements, you create confidence that withstands pressure, performs under stress, and grows stronger through challenges. Chapter 8: Advanced Influence Techniques: The Psychology of Getting What You Want Without Force. This chapter is absolutely incredible because it moves beyond basic persuasion into advanced influence techniques that work at deeper psychological levels. Influence is not about overpowering people or manipulating them into compliance. It's about understanding human psychology and creating conditions where people naturally want to cooperate with you. The most powerful influence techniques work by aligning with how people already think, feel, and make decisions rather than fighting against their natural tendencies. This is the key difference between manipulation and influence. Manipulation works against people's nature and creates resistance. Influence works with people's nature and creates willing cooperation. The foundation of ethical influence is understanding that people don't resist ideas. They resist the feeling of having ideas imposed on them. When you can guide people to discover conclusions, solutions, or decisions on their own, they feel ownership and commitment rather than resentment or resistance. This requires shifting from telling people what to think to helping them think more effectively about their own situations and goals. The first advanced influence technique is assumption reframing. Most people make unconscious assumptions about what's possible, normal, or appropriate in any given situation. These assumptions create invisible boundaries that limit their thinking and decision making. By skillfully challenging or reframing these assumptions, you can expand their perception of available options. Assumption reframing works by introducing new perspectives that highlight the arbitrary nature of current limitations. You might ask questions like, what if we didn't have to follow the usual process? Or, what would be possible if budget wasn't a constraint? Or, how would this look if we were starting from scratch? These questions help people break free from limiting assumptions and consider new possibilities. The key to effective assumption reframing is making it feel natural and collaborative rather than pushy or argumentative. You're not attacking their current thinking. You're helping them expand it. You present alternative perspectives as interesting possibilities to explore rather than as corrections to their faulty reasoning. The second technique is social proof orchestration. People look to others for guidance about what to think, feel, and do, especially in uncertain situations. By strategically highlighting relevant examples of others who have made similar decisions, you can influence people's perception of what's normal, reasonable, or beneficial. Social proof orchestration requires careful selection of relevant examples that match the person's situation, values, and concerns. The examples should come from people they respect or identify with and demonstrate outcomes they want to achieve. Generic testimonials or irrelevant examples can actually backfire by highlighting differences rather than similarities. The third technique is cognitive reframing. This involves helping people interpret situations, events, or information in ways that support better decision making. The same facts can be perceived very differently depending on how they are framed and presented. Skilled influence practitioners help people see situations in ways that reveal opportunities rather than just obstacles. Cognitive reframing works by shifting focus from problems to solutions, from costs to benefits, from risks to potential rewards, from what's missing to what's possible. You're not changing the facts, you're helping people interpret those facts in more productive and optimistic ways that enable action rather than paralysis. The fourth technique is reciprocity activation. People feel psychologically obligated to return favors and reciprocate kindness. This principle can be used ethically by providing genuine value before asking for anything in return. When you help people solve problems, achieve goals, or gain insights, they naturally want to cooperate with your requests. Reciprocity activation works best when the value you provide is unexpected, personalized, and clearly beneficial to the recipient. It should feel like a genuine gift rather than an obvious manipulation tactic. The goal is to create positive feelings and goodwill that naturally lead to cooperation rather than obligation that feels manipulative. The fifth technique is consistency leveraging. People have a strong psychological need to remain consistent with their previous statements, decisions, and public commitments. Once someone takes a position or makes a commitment, they feel internal pressure to act in ways that support that position, even when circumstances change. Consistency leveraging involves helping people connect your proposals to commitments, values, or positions they've already established. If someone has publicly committed to improving customer service, you can frame your proposal as a way to fulfill that commitment. If they've stated certain values, you can show how your request aligns with those values. The sixth technique is scarcity and urgency creation. People value things more when they perceive them as rare, limited, or time sensitive. This principle can be used ethically when the scarcity or urgency is genuine and relevant to the person's goals. Creating false scarcity is manipulative and backfires when discovered. Genuine scarcity might include limited availability of opportunities, resources, or timing windows. Real urgency might involve deadlines, consequences, or changing market conditions. When highlighting scarcity or urgency, you should also provide clear information about why the limitation exists and what the consequences of delay might be. The seventh technique is emotional alignment. People make decisions based on emotions, then justify them with logic. Effective influence requires connecting with people's genuine emotions and helping them see how your proposal satisfies their emotional needs and desires, not just their logical requirements. Emotional alignment means understanding what people really care about at a deeper level than their stated rational preferences. What are their fears, hopes, ambitions, and values? How do they want to feel about themselves and their decisions? What emotional outcomes are they trying to achieve or avoid? These advanced influence techniques work because they align with natural human psychology rather than fighting against it. They help people make better decisions that serve their interests while also achieving your legitimate objectives. When used ethically, they create win-win outcomes that strengthen relationships and build long-term cooperation and trust. Chapter 9: Crisis Communication. How to stay powerful when everything goes wrong. This chapter absolutely fascinated me because it reveals something about leadership and communication that most people never think about. Crisis situations reveal who has real communication power and who just appears confident when things are easy. When pressure mounts, emotions run high, and stakes become critical, most people's communication skills completely collapse. They become reactive, defensive, scattered, or paralyzed. But here's what's fascinating. Masters of crisis communication actually become more powerful and influential during difficult times because they know how to maintain composure, clarity, and leadership when others lose control. Crisis communication is not about having all the answers or preventing all problems. It's about maintaining your effectiveness and influence when facing unexpected challenges, uncertainty, and high stakes pressure. The people who master this skill become the ones others turn to when things go wrong, which creates enormous opportunities for leadership and advancement. They are remembered not for the crisis itself, but for how they handled it. That's powerful. The first principle of crisis communication is emotional regulation under pressure. When crisis hits, your first responsibility is managing your own emotional state, because your emotions will either stabilize or destabilize everyone around you. People look to leaders for emotional cues about how serious the situation is and how they should respond. Emotional regulation doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means processing emotions internally before they leak out in destructive ways. You feel the stress, anxiety, or urgency, but you don't let those feelings control your communication or decision making. This emotional control gives others confidence that you can handle the situation effectively. Techniques for crisis emotional regulation include controlled breathing to maintain physiological calm, strategic pausing before responding to avoid reactive statements, grounding yourself in facts rather than fears, and focusing on solutions rather than dwelling on problems. These practices help you maintain the clear thinking necessary for effective crisis leadership. The second principle is information management and transparency. During crisis, people are hungry for information and they'll create their own explanations if you don't provide clear, accurate updates. This rumor generation often makes situations worse than they actually are. So, proactive communication is essential for maintaining control and confidence. Effective crisis information management means providing regular updates even when you don't have complete information. You communicate what you know, what you don't know, what you're doing to find out more, and when you expect to have additional information. This transparency builds trust and prevents the information vacuum that leads to speculation and panic. You should also acknowledge the seriousness of situations without being alarmist or defeatist. People need to understand that you're taking things seriously and responding appropriately, but they also need confidence that the situation is manageable. This balance requires careful word choice and tone management. The third principle is solution-focused communication. Crisis situations naturally generate problem-focused thinking, where people become absorbed in analyzing what went wrong, who's to blame, and how bad things might get. While some problem analysis is necessary, effective crisis communication quickly shifts focus to solution development and action planning. Solution-focused communication means acknowledging problems without dwelling on them, redirecting energy toward constructive action, and maintaining optimism about finding workable solutions. You ask questions like, what can we do now to improve this situation? What resources do we have available? And what would success look like given our current constraints? This approach doesn't mean ignoring real problems or being unrealistically positive. It means channeling mental and emotional energy toward productive problem solving. The fourth principle is stakeholder-specific messaging. Different groups of people affected by a crisis have different concerns, information needs, and decision-making authority. Effective crisis communication involves tailoring your message content, timing, and delivery method to each stakeholder group's specific situation and requirements. Internal team members need detailed information about immediate action steps, role clarifications, and resource availability. Senior leadership needs strategic perspective, impact assessment, and recommendation options. External partners need relevant updates without confidential details. Customers need reassurance about how the situation affects them and what you're doing to protect their interests. The fifth principle is decisive leadership communication. Crises require decisions to be made quickly with incomplete information under time pressure. Effective crisis communicators can gather input quickly, synthesize information efficiently, and communicate decisions clearly even when they are not completely certain about all the implications. Decisive leadership communication involves stating decisions clearly, explaining the reasoning behind them, assigning specific responsibilities with deadlines, and establishing follow-up processes for monitoring results and making adjustments. You don't wait for perfect information or universal consensus because delay often makes problems worse. The key is balancing speed with thoroughness. The sixth principle is reputation protection and recovery. How you communicate during crisis significantly impacts your long-term reputation and relationships. People remember how you handle pressure more than they remember the specific problems you faced. This makes crisis communication an opportunity to demonstrate character, competence, and leadership rather than just a challenge to survive. Reputation protection involves taking appropriate responsibility without unnecessary self-blame, maintaining professional standards even under pressure, and following through on commitments made during crisis periods. Recovery communication focuses on learning from the crisis, improving systems and processes to prevent similar problems, and demonstrating that you've grown stronger and more capable as a result of handling the challenge. The seventh principle is relationship strengthening through adversity. Crisis situations can either damage relationships through poor communication or strengthen them through effective crisis management. When you handle crisis well, people develop deeper trust and respect for your leadership capabilities and character. Relationship strengthening happens when you maintain clear communication, keep commitments made under pressure, show genuine concern for others' welfare, and follow through on promises to improve situations. People who see you perform well under pressure become stronger advocates and supporters in the future. Crisis communication mastery transforms you from someone who struggles during difficult periods to someone who actually gains influence and respect through effective crisis leadership. Instead of avoiding challenging situations, you become the person others seek out when they need strong, steady leadership during uncertain times. Chapter 10: Building communication systems that create lasting influence. Alright, this chapter is critical because it shifts focus from individual communication moments to systematic influence building over time. Most people approach communication as a series of isolated interactions without any systematic strategy for building cumulative influence. They have good conversations and bad conversations, random successes and unexpected failures, but no coherent system for consistently developing their communication power and expanding their influence. Building lasting influence requires systematic approaches that compound over time, rather than relying on individual moments of brilliance. Think about it like this. One amazing presentation might get you noticed, but consistent excellence across multiple interactions builds your reputation and influence. That's the fundamental insight here. The foundation of systematic communication influence is understanding that every interaction either builds or erodes your reputation for competence, trustworthiness, and leadership. People form impressions about your communication abilities based on patterns they observe over time, not just single conversations. This means you need consistent standards and approaches that reinforce positive perceptions through multiple touchpoints. The first element of communication systems is message consistency across contexts. Your core messages about your capabilities, values, priorities, and expertise should remain consistent whether you're speaking in formal presentations, casual conversations, written communications, or crisis situations. This consistency helps people develop clear, accurate impressions of who you are and what you stand for. Message consistency doesn't mean being rigid or robotic in your communication. It means having clear, authentic core themes that appear reliably across different formats and situations. When people interact with you multiple times, they should get reinforcing evidence about your key strengths and values, rather than confusing mixed signals that make you hard to categorize or remember. You develop message consistency by identifying your core professional identity and value proposition, then finding natural ways to reinforce these themes in diverse communication situations. This requires conscious preparation and practice, but becomes more natural over time as you develop communication habits that automatically reinforce your desired reputation. The second element is relationship mapping and strategic networking. Influence flows through relationships, and building systematic influence requires understanding your relationship ecosystem and developing strategic approaches for strengthening key connections over time. This means identifying who influences whom in your professional environment and building authentic relationships with those key connectors. Relationship mapping involves analyzing formal and informal power structures, identifying decision makers and influencers, understanding relationship dynamics between key players, and recognizing opportunities for adding value to important relationships. This analysis helps you prioritize relationship building efforts and develop appropriate strategies for different types of connections. Strategic networking goes beyond collecting contacts to focus on creating genuine mutual value with people who can expand your influence and opportunities. This requires understanding others' goals, challenges, and priorities, then finding authentic ways to help them achieve their objectives while building stronger professional relationships. The third element is expertise positioning and thought leadership development. People develop lasting influence by becoming known for specific expertise and insights that others find valuable. This requires consistently developing your knowledge and capabilities in chosen areas, then systematically sharing those insights through multiple communication channels. Expertise positioning involves identifying areas where you can develop distinctive competence, then consistently communicating insights and perspectives that demonstrate that expertise. This might include industry knowledge, technical skills, problem-solving approaches, leadership philosophies, or relationship building capabilities that others recognize as valuable. Thought leadership development requires regularly creating and sharing content that showcases your expertise and provides value to others. This might include presentations, articles, social media posts, internal reports, strategic recommendations, or informal mentoring that helps others learn from your knowledge and experience. The fourth element is feedback systems and continuous improvement. Systematic influence building requires regular feedback about your communication effectiveness and consistent efforts to improve your skills and approaches. Most people receive very little direct feedback about their communication and therefore miss opportunities to enhance their influence. Effective feedback systems include seeking input from trusted colleagues and mentors, tracking outcomes from important communications, observing others' responses and reactions to your messages, and regularly assessing your progress toward influence and relationship goals. This feedback helps you identify what's working well and what needs adjustment. The fifth element is platform development and visibility creation. Lasting influence requires that people know about your capabilities and expertise, which means systematically creating visibility for your ideas, contributions, and achievements. This involves identifying appropriate platforms and opportunities to showcase your communication skills and thought leadership. Platform development might include volunteering for high visibility projects, seeking speaking opportunities, writing for company publications, participating in industry events, joining professional organizations, or taking leadership roles in important initiatives. These platforms give you opportunities to demonstrate your communication capabilities to broader audiences. The sixth element is succession planning and mentorship systems. Lasting influence involves developing others who can extend and amplify your impact over time. By mentoring and developing other effective communicators, you create a network of people who understand and support your approaches and can advocate for your ideas even when you're not present. Mentorship systems involve identifying high potential individuals who can benefit from your guidance, then systematically helping them develop their communication skills and advance their careers. This creates loyalty and advocacy while also establishing your reputation as someone who develops talent and builds strong teams. The seventh element is legacy building and institutional influence. The highest level of communication influence involves creating changes in how organizations or industries think and operate. This requires developing approaches that become embedded in systems, processes, and cultures, rather than just influencing individual decisions or relationships. Building communication systems that create lasting influence transforms you from someone who has occasional communication successes to someone who systematically expands their impact and reputation over time. These systems ensure that your influence grows consistently rather than fluctuating randomly based on individual interactions or circumstances. Chapter 11: The Charisma Formula: Manufacturing Magnetic Presence on Command. Okay, this chapter genuinely surprised me because I always thought charisma was something mysterious that some people were just born with. The book makes it crystal clear. Charisma is not a mysterious quality that some people are born with and others lack forever. It's a specific combination of behaviors, attitudes, and communication patterns that can be learned, developed, and deployed strategically. The most charismatic people you know became that way through understanding and practicing specific techniques, not through genetic luck or natural talent. This is huge because it means you can develop charisma systematically. You don't have to be born with it or wait for it to magically appear. You can build it. The foundation of charisma is making other people feel important, valued, and understood when they interact with you. Charismatic people have mastered the art of focusing their attention and energy on others in ways that create powerful positive emotions. This isn't manipulation or fake interest. It's genuine engagement combined with specific skills that amplify the impact of that engagement. Most people think charisma is about being entertaining, charming, or the center of attention. But real charisma is about making others feel like they're the center of attention when you're with them. Charismatic people have the rare ability to make each person they interact with feel like the most important person in the room at that moment. The first element of the charisma formula is presence intensity. This means giving your complete, undivided attention to whoever you're communicating with, regardless of distractions, competing priorities, or other interesting people nearby. Most people give partial attention while thinking about other things, checking devices, or scanning the room for more important conversations. Presence intensity requires mental discipline to focus completely on the current interaction. You're not thinking about your next meeting, your phone notifications, or other people you want to talk to. Your entire mental and emotional energy is directed toward understanding and engaging with the person in front of you. This level of attention is rare in modern society where everyone is constantly distracted and multitasking. When someone experiences your complete, focused attention, it creates a powerful positive emotion that they associate with you. They feel heard, understood, and valued in ways that most interactions don't provide. That's the psychological magic of presence intensity. The second element is emotional attunement. Charismatic people are masters at reading and responding to other people's emotional states. They can sense when someone is excited, nervous, proud, frustrated, or uncertain, and they adjust their communication style to match and support those emotions appropriately. Emotional attunement involves paying attention to subtle cues like tone of voice, body language, energy level, and word choice that reveal how someone is feeling beyond what they're explicitly saying. You're reading between the lines to understand their emotional experience, not just their factual communication. Once you understand someone's emotional state, you can respond in ways that validate and support their feelings. If they are excited about something, you match their enthusiasm. If they are worried about a challenge, you acknowledge their concern and offer appropriate support. If they are proud of an achievement, you celebrate with them genuinely. The third element is curiosity amplification. Charismatic people ask better questions and show genuine interest in learning about others. They are not just waiting for their turn to talk or looking for opportunities to share their own stories. They are authentically curious about other people's experiences, perspectives, and insights. Curiosity amplification means asking follow-up questions that show you're really listening and want to understand more deeply. Instead of surface-level small talk, you probe into what makes people passionate, what challenges they're facing, what they're learning, and what they're excited about. These deeper questions create more meaningful connections. The key is that your curiosity must be genuine, not strategic. People can sense when you're asking questions just to appear interested, versus when you're actually fascinated by their answers. Real curiosity creates real connection, while fake interest feels manipulative and hollow. The fourth element is energy management and contagion. Charismatic people understand that energy is contagious, and they consciously manage their energy level to create positive emotional states in others. They bring appropriate energy to different situations, whether that's calm confidence in crisis moments, enthusiasm for new projects, or focused intensity for important discussions. Energy management requires self-awareness about your current emotional and physical state, combined with the ability to consciously adjust your energy to serve the situation and the people you're with. If you're tired or stressed, you don't let that negative energy infect your interactions. If the situation calls for high energy, you find ways to generate genuine enthusiasm. Energy contagion works because humans unconsciously mirror the emotional states of people around them, especially people they respect or admire. When you consistently bring positive, appropriate energy to interactions, people start feeling better when they're around you, which makes them want to spend more time with you. The fifth element is storytelling mastery. Charismatic people are compelling storytellers who can make ordinary experiences interesting and meaningful. They understand how to structure narratives, create emotional engagement, and use stories to illustrate points, connect with others, and create memorable shared experiences. Effective storytelling involves selecting relevant details that create vivid mental pictures, using appropriate pacing to build tension and interest, including emotional content that helps listeners connect with the experience, and ending with insights or lessons that add value beyond entertainment. Charismatic storytelling isn't about having the most interesting life or most dramatic experiences. It's about finding the universal human elements in ordinary situations and presenting them in ways that help others see new perspectives or feel understood in their own similar experiences. The sixth element is vulnerability calibration. Charismatic people share appropriate personal information that helps others feel connected to them without oversharing or making others uncomfortable. They understand the difference between strategic vulnerability that builds connection and emotional dumping that creates awkwardness. Strategic vulnerability means sharing challenges, struggles, or uncertainties that others can relate to while maintaining your overall competence and strength. You might share a professional challenge you're navigating, a skill you're working to develop, or a lesson you learned from a mistake. The seventh element is positive assumption and benefit of the doubt. Charismatic people consistently assume positive intentions and give others the benefit of the doubt rather than being suspicious, cynical, or quick to judge. This creates psychological safety that allows others to be more open, authentic, and creative in their interactions. Positive assumption means interpreting ambiguous behavior in the most charitable way possible, giving people credit for good intentions even when their actions don't work out perfectly, and focusing on people's strengths and potential rather than their weaknesses and limitations. The eighth element is celebration and recognition. Charismatic people are generous with praise, recognition, and celebration of others' achievements. They notice when people do good work, overcome challenges, or demonstrate positive qualities, and they express genuine appreciation for those accomplishments. The charisma formula works because it addresses fundamental human needs for attention, understanding, recognition, and connection. When you consistently make others feel valued and important through your communication style, you become someone people want to be around, work with, and support. This creates opportunities, influence, and relationships that compound over time. Chapter 12: Difficult Conversations. How to navigate conflict without losing respect. This chapter is absolutely critical because it deals with something that most people avoid at all costs: difficult conversations. Most people avoid difficult conversations until problems become crises, or they approach them so poorly that they damage relationships and make situations worse. The ability to navigate challenging discussions skillfully is one of the most valuable communication competencies you can develop. Here's what's powerful about mastering this skill: it transforms potential relationship damage into relationship strengthening, and it turns conflicts into collaborations. Difficult conversations are not inherently bad or destructive. They become destructive when they are handled poorly. When approached with the right mindset, preparation, and techniques, challenging discussions can actually build trust, deepen relationships, and create better outcomes for everyone involved. The key is learning to have these conversations in ways that preserve dignity, maintain respect, and focus on solutions rather than blame. The foundation of effective, difficult conversations is shifting from adversarial thinking to collaborative problem solving. Most people approach conflict as a battle where someone wins and someone loses. But this mindset guarantees relationship damage regardless of the immediate outcome. Collaborative thinking focuses on understanding different perspectives and finding solutions that address everyone's legitimate needs. The first principle of difficult conversation mastery is preparation and emotional regulation. Before engaging in any challenging discussion, you need to clarify your objectives, manage your emotional state, and develop a strategy for keeping the conversation productive. Most difficult conversations fail because people enter them emotionally reactive and without clear goals. Preparation involves identifying what outcome you actually want from the conversation, not just what you want to say or prove. Are you trying to solve a specific problem, change someone's behavior, clarify expectations, repair a relationship, or prevent future issues? Having clear objectives helps you stay focused on productive outcomes rather than getting sidetracked by emotions or blame. Emotional regulation requires processing your feelings about the situation before the conversation so they don't leak out in destructive ways during the discussion. If you're angry, hurt, frustrated, or disappointed, you need to acknowledge those emotions and develop strategies for managing them during the conversation. The second principle is opening with intention and respect. How you start a difficult conversation largely determines how it will unfold. Aggressive, accusatory, or emotional openings immediately trigger defensiveness and conflict escalation. Respectful, intentional openings create space for productive dialogue, even about challenging topics. Effective openings acknowledge the difficulty of the conversation, express your positive intentions, and invite collaboration. You might say something like, "I'd like to discuss something that's been concerning me, and I hope we can work together to find a good solution." Or, "I value our relationship and want to address an issue that's been affecting our work together." The third principle is Facts versus interpretations separation. Most difficult conversations get derailed because people present their interpretations, opinions, or assumptions as if they were facts. This creates unnecessary argument about subjective perspectives rather than focusing on objective information and workable solutions. Facts are observable, verifiable information that both parties can agree on. Interpretations are your opinions, assumptions, or conclusions about what those facts mean. Separating these elements allows you to discuss objective information without immediately triggering disagreement about subjective interpretations. For example, saying you don't respect deadlines is an interpretation that will likely trigger defensiveness. Saying the project was submitted 2 days after the agreed deadline is a fact that can be discussed objectively. Once you establish the facts, you can explore different interpretations and solutions without getting stuck in argument about subjective perspectives. The fourth principle is listening for understanding, not rebuttal. Most people listen to difficult conversations primarily to find flaws in the other person's reasoning or opportunities to present their counterarguments. This defensive listening prevents real understanding and escalates conflict because people feel unheard and dismissed. Listening for understanding means genuinely trying to comprehend the other person's perspective, concerns, and needs. Even when you disagree with their conclusions or approaches, you're seeking to understand their reasoning, their constraints, and their desired outcomes before focusing on your own position. Understanding doesn't require agreement, but it creates foundation for finding mutually acceptable solutions. When people feel understood, they become more open to understanding your perspective. It's a reciprocal process. The fifth principle is acknowledging valid points and shared concerns. Even in conflicts, there are usually some areas of agreement or shared concern that can serve as foundation for problem solving. Acknowledging these commonalities helps de-escalate tension and creates collaborative momentum. Valid point acknowledgement means recognizing when the other person raises legitimate concerns or accurate observations, even if you disagree with their overall position or proposed solutions. This shows intellectual honesty and reduces their need to keep arguing points you've already accepted. The sixth principle is solution-focused redirection. Difficult conversations can easily become stuck in problem analysis, blame assignment, or emotional venting that doesn't improve anything. Effective conversation management involves acknowledging problems and emotions, but consistently redirecting energy towards solution development and action planning. Solution-focused questions include: what would need to change for this to work better? What options do we have for addressing this concern? What would success look like from both our perspectives? And what specific steps could we take to improve this situation? The seventh principle is agreement documentation and follow-through. Many difficult conversations end with verbal agreements that are later forgotten, misremembered, or interpreted differently by different parties. Effective conversation closure includes confirming what was agreed to, establishing specific next steps, and creating accountability for follow-through. Mastering difficult conversations transforms you from someone who avoids conflict until it becomes destructive to someone who can address problems early and constructively. This skill prevents small issues from becoming major crises, builds stronger relationships through effective problem solving, and establishes your reputation as someone who can handle challenging situations with grace and effectiveness. Chapter 13: Digital Communication Mastery. Influence in the virtual world. Alright, this chapter is incredibly relevant because the world has fundamentally changed. The digital revolution has transformed how we communicate, but most people are still using analog communication strategies in digital environments. This mismatch between old approaches and new mediums severely limits their influence and effectiveness. Mastering digital communication requires understanding how virtual interactions differ from face-to-face communication and adapting your strategies accordingly. This is something that honestly blew my mind while reading this chapter, because I realized how many communication principles remain the same while the execution completely changes. Digital communication removes many of the nonverbal cues that drive influence in person. tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, energy levels, and physical presence are either completely absent or significantly diminished in digital formats. This means you must become more skilled at creating influence through word choice, message structure, timing, and strategic use of available digital tools. The absence of immediate feedback also changes digital communication dynamics. In face to face conversations, you can read reactions in real time and adjust your approach instantly. Digital communication often involves delayed responses, which means you must anticipate reactions and craft messages that work effectively without real time calibration. The first principle of digital communication mastery is platform optimization. Different digital platforms have different communication norms, user expectations, and algorithmic behaviors that affect how your messages are received and distributed. What works on email doesn't work on social media. What works in video calls doesn't work in text messages. Platform optimization requires understanding the specific characteristics of each digital environment and adapting your communication style to match user expectations while still maintaining your authentic voice and achieving your influence objectives. This isn't about becoming a different person on different platforms. It's about emphasizing different aspects of your communication style to match platform norms. The second principle is attention capture and retention. Digital environments are extremely competitive for attention, with people constantly bombarded by messages, notifications, and competing content. Your digital communication must be designed to break through this noise and hold attention long enough to deliver your message effectively. Attention capture starts with compelling openings that immediately signal value, relevance, or urgency. This might include intriguing questions, surprising statistics, relevant stories, or clear statements of benefit. You have seconds to convince someone that your message is worth their time and attention. The third principle is emotional connection. Without physical presence, creating emotional engagement through digital communication requires more intentional effort because you can't rely on physical charisma, vocal tone, or personal presence to create connection. You must generate emotional engagement primarily through your content strategy and word choice. Emotional connection in digital formats comes from understanding and addressing your audience's concerns, aspirations, fears, and desires through your messaging. You need to demonstrate that you understand their situation and genuinely care about helping them achieve their goals or solve their problems. Personal storytelling becomes even more important in digital communication because stories create emotional engagement and help people feel connected to you as a person rather than just a source of information. Strategic vulnerability and authentic sharing help humanize your digital presence and create the personal connection that builds influence. The fourth principle is credibility establishment and social proof integration. Digital environments make it easy for people to research your background, verify your claims, and check your reputation before deciding whether to trust your communication. This makes credibility establishment crucial for digital influence. Digital credibility comes from consistent, high-quality content that demonstrates expertise, professional presentation that reflects attention to detail, social proof through testimonials and recommendations, and transparent, authentic communication that builds trust over time. The fifth principle is strategic timing and frequency optimization. Digital communication timing affects whether your messages are seen, read, and acted upon. Different audiences have different online behavior patterns, and different platforms have optimal posting times that affect message visibility and engagement. Timing optimization requires understanding when your specific audience is most likely to be online and receptive to your type of message. Frequency optimization involves finding the right balance between staying visible and relevant without becoming annoying or overwhelming. The sixth principle is multimedia integration and visual communication. Digital platforms increasingly favor visual content over text-only communication. This means developing skills in creating and using images, videos, graphics, and other visual elements that support and enhance your written communication. Visual communication doesn't require professional design skills, but it does require understanding how to use visual elements strategically to support your message objectives. They should enhance rather than distract from your core message. The seventh principle is engagement cultivation and community building. Digital communication is increasingly interactive, with audiences expecting opportunities to respond, comment, and engage rather than just passively consuming content. Building digital influence requires creating opportunities for meaningful engagement that builds relationships over time. Engagement cultivation involves asking questions that encourage responses, sharing content that invites discussion, responding thoughtfully to comments and messages, and creating opportunities for your audience to contribute value rather than just receiving it from you. Digital communication mastery transforms your online presence from a static information source to a dynamic influence platform that builds relationships, creates opportunities, and establishes your expertise across multiple digital environments. Chapter 14: The Mastery Mindset: Becoming a Lifelong Student of Human Psychology. This chapter really captured something important about communication excellence. Communication mastery is not a destination you reach and then maintain effortlessly. It's an ongoing journey of learning, observation, practice, and refinement. The most powerful communicators never stop studying human psychology, observing social dynamics, and experimenting with new approaches. The mastery mindset separates people who plateau at basic competence from those who continue developing extraordinary influence throughout their careers. This mindset involves treating every interaction as a learning opportunity, approaching communication challenges with curiosity rather than frustration, and systematically studying what works and what doesn't in your specific contexts and relationships. Most people think communication improvement happens through formal training courses or workshops. But real mastery comes from developing sophisticated observation skills and consistently analyzing your communication experiences. You become your own communication laboratory, constantly testing hypotheses and refining your approaches based on real-world feedback. The first element of the mastery mindset is pattern recognition development. Human behavior follows predictable patterns, and master communicators become expert at recognizing these patterns quickly and adapting their approach accordingly. This pattern recognition allows them to read situations accurately, predict likely responses, and choose communication strategies that are most likely to achieve their objectives. Pattern recognition requires systematic observation of communication dynamics across multiple contexts, relationships, and situations. You start noticing how different personality types respond to different communication approaches, how cultural backgrounds affect communication preferences, how stress levels change people's receptivity to different messages, and how power dynamics influence conversation flow. The second element is feedback seeking and integration. Master communicators actively seek feedback about their communication effectiveness from multiple sources and use that feedback to continuously improve their approaches. They don't assume they know how they are being perceived or what impact their communication is having. Effective feedback seeking involves asking specific questions about communication effectiveness rather than general questions about performance. You also develop skills in reading nonverbal feedback during conversations and adjusting your approach in real time based on subtle cues about engagement, confusion, resistance, or enthusiasm. The third element is experimentation and calculated risk taking. Communication mastery requires trying new approaches, testing different strategies, and occasionally failing in order to discover what's possible beyond your current comfort zone. Safe, predictable communication leads to safe, predictable results, while breakthrough influence requires strategic experimentation. Effective experimentation involves trying new approaches in low-stakes situations first, then gradually applying successful techniques in higher-stakes contexts. The key is that your experimentation should be thoughtful and strategic rather than random or reckless. The fourth element is cross-domain learning and application. Communication insights come from many fields beyond traditional communication training, including psychology, neuroscience, sociology, theater, sales, negotiation, and leadership development. Master communicators study these diverse fields and adapt relevant insights to their communication challenges. The fifth element is systematic skill development and deliberate practice. Communication mastery requires moving beyond casual practice to deliberate practice that focuses on specific weaknesses and pushes your abilities beyond their current limits. This type of practice is more challenging than comfortable repetition but creates much faster improvement. You also develop supporting skills that enhance your communication effectiveness, such as emotional regulation skills that help you stay calm under pressure, analytical skills that help you understand complex situations, or creative skills that help you find new ways to explain difficult concepts. The sixth element is mental model development and framework creation. Master communicators develop sophisticated mental models for understanding communication dynamics and create personal frameworks for approaching different types of communication challenges. These models and frameworks help them process complex situations quickly and choose effective strategies efficiently. The seventh element is teaching and knowledge transfer. One of the most effective ways to deepen your communication mastery is teaching others what you've learned. Teaching forces you to organize your knowledge more clearly, identify gaps in your understanding, and develop better explanations for complex concepts. Teaching opportunities might include formal training sessions, informal mentoring, peer coaching, or simply helping colleagues improve their communication skills. Knowledge transfer also involves documenting your learning and creating systems that allow others to benefit from your communication insights. Chapter 15, Your Communication Revolution, Implementing Everything and Dominating Every Room. Alright, we're at the final chapter, and this is where everything comes together. Everything you've learned in this book becomes worthless unless you implement it systematically and consistently. Most people consume communication training and then go back to their old habits within weeks because they don't have a clear plan for turning knowledge into automatic behavior. This final chapter gives you a systematic approach for implementing these principles and transforming yourself into someone who dominates every communication situation. Real transformation happens when these principles become so deeply ingrained that you use them automatically without conscious effort. This level of integration requires systematic practice, structured feedback, and consistent refinement over months, not days or weeks. Your communication revolution starts with honest assessment of your current abilities and clear vision of where you want to be. Most people overestimate their communication skills and underestimate the effort required for real improvement. This gap between perception and reality prevents them from taking the systematic approach necessary for dramatic improvement. The first step is comprehensive skill assessment across all the areas covered in this book. Rate yourself honestly on first impression creation, authority projection, persuasion abilities, crisis communication skills, charisma development, and relationship building capabilities. Identify your strongest areas and your biggest weaknesses so you can prioritize your improvement efforts strategically. This assessment should include feedback from trusted colleagues, friends, and family members who have observed your communication in different contexts. Their perspectives often reveal blind spots that you can't see yourself and help you understand how others actually perceive your communication style and effectiveness. The second step is implementation, prioritization, and sequencing. You can't improve everything simultaneously, so you need to identify which improvements will create the biggest impact on your specific goals and circumstances. Consider your career objectives, relationship needs, and immediate challenges when deciding which communication skills to develop first. Start with foundational skills that support everything else before moving to advanced techniques. Emotional regulation and basic confidence are prerequisites for effective influence and persuasion. Clear thinking and message organization support both formal presentations and casual conversations. These fundamental capabilities make everything else easier and more effective. The third step is structured practice design and execution. Improvement requires deliberate practice, not just casual effort during normal conversations. This means creating specific practice scenarios that challenge your abilities, provide feedback opportunities, and push you beyond your comfort zone in controlled environments. Practice scenarios might include recording yourself presenting and analyzing your performance, role playing difficult conversations with trusted partners, practicing influence techniques in low stake situations, or joining groups like Toastmasters that provide structured feedback on communication skills. The key is that practice should be more challenging than your normal communication situations so that real conversations feel easier rather than harder. The fourth step is feedback system establishment and use. You need reliable ways to assess your progress and identify areas that need continued work. This requires both formal feedback mechanisms and informal observation skills that help you learn from every communication experience. Formal feedback might include regular check-ins with mentors or coaches, structured assessment from colleagues or supervisors, participation in communication training programs, or video recording and analysis of important presentations or meetings. Informal feedback comes from developing sensitivity to how people respond to your communication. The fifth step is habit formation and automatic behavior development. The goal is not just to know communication techniques, but to use them automatically without conscious effort. This requires consistent repetition until new communication patterns become your default responses rather than special techniques you have to remember to use. Habit formation works best when you focus on one specific behavior at a time until it becomes automatic before adding new behaviors. The key is consistent daily practice rather than intensive occasional effort. Small daily improvements compound over months into dramatic transformations, while sporadic, intense practice sessions create temporary improvement that fades quickly. The sixth step is real-world application and progressive challenge. Once you've developed basic competence through practice scenarios, you need to apply your new skills in increasingly challenging real-world situations. This might mean volunteering for presentations, taking leadership roles in difficult projects, or initiating important conversations you've been avoiding. Progressive challenge means gradually increasing the stakes and difficulty of your communication situations as your skills improve. You start with low-risk situations where mistakes won't have serious consequences and gradually work up to high-stakes communications where your skills can create significant opportunities or outcomes. The seventh step is continuous refinement and advanced development. Communication mastery is a lifelong journey, not a one-time achievement. Even after you've transformed your basic communication effectiveness, you can continue developing more sophisticated capabilities that create even greater influence and impact. Advanced development might include studying specialized influence techniques, developing expertise in specific communication contexts like negotiations or crisis management, or building thought leadership platforms that establish your reputation as a communication expert. Your communication revolution culminates when these skills become so natural and automatic that you don't think about them consciously during conversations. You simply communicate powerfully, effectively, and influentially because that's who you've become, not because you're trying to use specific techniques. The techniques in this book have the power to transform not just how you communicate, but how others perceive you, what opportunities come your way, and what you're able to achieve throughout your career and life. But only if you implement them systematically, consistently, and with the commitment to continuous improvement that separates masters from amateurs. Your communication revolution starts now with your very next conversation. The only question is whether you'll commit to the process that creates extraordinary results or settle for the modest improvements that come from casual effort. The choice is yours, and it will determine whether you join the ranks of truly powerful communicators or remain among the masses who struggle to be heard, respected, and influential. Wow, what a journey through Speak Smart. The Psychology of Powerful Communication. I genuinely hope this deep dive into all 15 chapters has given you real insight into how communication actually works at a psychological level and practical strategies you can apply immediately. This book isn't theoretical, it's practical, it's proven, and it works. Here's what I want you to remember as you finish this. Every single principle we've covered today can be implemented starting right now. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment or until you've studied everything multiple times. Take one principle, practice it for a week, and notice how people respond differently. Then add another. This is how real change happens. I absolutely recommend getting the full book and studying it deeply because there's so much more nuance and depth that we could only touch on in this format. But more importantly, I want you to commit to your own communication revolution. Commit to continuous improvement. Commit to becoming someone who influences others through authentic power rather than manipulation or force. Thank you so much for watching this entire breakdown. If you found this valuable, please smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into powerful books and knowledge. And don't forget to check out our book summary playlist, where we've got complete breakdowns of incredible books that will transform your personal and professional development. I'm Mano, and remember, powerful communication is not a talent, it's a skill, and skills can be learned. Go out there and dominate every room. Peace.